Hello, welcome to the Ethics Experts. I'm here with Deb. How are you, Deb?
Hey, good, Nick. Good to talk to you.
Yeah, good to talk to you. Thanks for making some time for us today. I've been so excited to get you on here after, we met a couple, I don't know, what is it, a few weeks ago at this point? Maybe it's a month or
Yeah,
so
maybe
ago.
longer.
Yeah,
Yeah, we're old friends.
old friends. It feels like we're old friends. Feels like we grew up together at this point. So I would just love to jump in. Maybe you can just start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and your business, which some people may think it's weird that we're talking because in certain realities, we may be competitors, but I kind of look at you as kind of a kindred spirit and a kindred soul. And I think we're both kind of trying to make the same impact on the world. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your company, and, we can start talking about how you got into this game.
Yeah, Deb Muller. I'm the CEO and founder of HR Acuity, and we are the only technology specifically developed for managing employee relations and investigations. And I actually don't think we're competitors at all. I think there's a good start and stop point, and that we actually work really well together. But you're right. I mean, our aim is to create better, safer, and fair workplaces for employees.
Yeah, it's an amazing thing that you guys are doing. I've been following you guys a lot on LinkedIn, and your culture is something that's really special. And I want to spend some time kind of talking about that because I think you've built something that's really really awesome. I think there's a lot of companies in this game that kind of talk a big game, but they don't really like live it out. But the authenticity that I kind of get from you, just from talking to you and getting to know you, you can see that kind of ripple through your organization. And I would bet that that's not by chance. That's probably by design.
I guess it's just, what I would expect, right? What I would expect as an employee. I think I was fortunate to have good experiences in my career. And was starting HR Acuity, I started it in 2006, really as not a tech company, but as a provider of third-party workplace investigations. And my expectations were, okay, I'm going to have this consultancy business. I might grow it a little bit. And because of that, I am just so fortunate and privileged to work with these people that have kind of hitched their wagon to me and said, yeah, we like what you're doing. We believe in you and we want to go on this journey with you, that, we're all part of this together and we got to treat them that way.
And from like day one that you interact with somebody who's new to be coming onto your team, how do you kind of message that kind of stuff? Like, how do you talk about it? And you know what I'm saying? Like, it obviously resonates with the people on your team, but like, when do you start talking about it and when do they start believing it?
When do I start talking about it? Well, in the interview, I mean, I really talk about what it means to be part of the team. That you have to have a passion for what we're doing. I don't want someone that just comes to work, right? There has to be an urgency for our mission and what we're trying to achieve, and that we're all in it. Like, if you're a person that likes to sit in a closet all day and just do their work by themselves, it's probably not the right place for you. If you want to be told what to do every day, it's probably not the right place for you. But if you're a person that can get behind it and you get excited about just doing things quickly and getting them done and making an impact, this could be the right place. I mean, when we started, again, doing investigations, I thought it was kind of about doing investigations, conducting investigations. And even when we first, it was me, who am I kidding, back then, right? When I had this crazy idea to develop technology, because I had zero technology background, I thought that was a good idea. It was about putting process to something that I knew from my own career didn't have a process, and there was a lack of consistency. But I never thought about the impact that it was going to have on employees and the work environment. I thought, okay, there's no process, a little chaotic. People need the tools. They can use technology for it, get some analytics for it. But it's really changed. And when we talk to our employees about the fact, our vision is, 2025, we're going to impact over 5 million employees globally, because their organizations are going to have adopted HR Acuity. So they're going to come to work knowing that if something goes wrong, which happens, and we're not going to stop everything from going wrong at work, the organization is going to be serious about it. They're going to have a process to take care of it so that they can do their best job, and feel comfortable in the environment. And that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I mean, it obviously resonates with me because that's kind of my heart and passion. And how hard is it though, as you're trying to, because you guys are growing fast, you guys are really making a huge impact on the world. As you're looking for, new people to come onto your team, how do you cue in on that stuff? And how do you kind of draw, this is kind of a multi-part question, so get ready. like, how do you cue in on that stuff? And how do you also kind of draw the line between, you know, the read that you get from whoever you're talking to? Obviously, or presumably, a lot of the stuff you're talking about resonates with people, because I think we all want to make an impact on the world. We all want to make a difference. We all want to leave the place better than we found it. Like all those things.
Especially during interviews.
Yeah, exactly. Like when they're trying to sell you on it, right?
Yeah.
And then, but I would imagine that, you know, you have a high performance culture and a high performance business, and just the way you kind of talked about people who thrive in your organization. Hey, if you like to get things done versus kind of sitting on your hands and being an empty suit, then you may, you know, you may work here. But I'm saying in that interview process, when you're kind of talking about, hey, this is our purpose and this is my passion and this is why I got into this game and this is how some of the things that I've sort of brought to the table have been resonating in the marketplace, and they're like, you know, nodding and they're like, wow, yeah, this sounds phenomenal. How do you kind of cue in on whether that's not
Real or
authentic, but if they have that other kind of piece of the puzzle that is the sort of action behind the heart? Do you know what I'm asking?
no, I do. First of all, it's not that easy. You'd think it is, but it's not that easy. First of all, there's a couple things. I always look for someone that has a passion in something, right? Can you demonstrate that you've been passionate about something in the past, whether in high school you played the viola or you did some volunteer work that you do outside of work, something that just has driven you? Because I want people that understand that adrenaline and how that feels.
Mm.
The second thing, I have two questions that I ask in interviews, and the genesis of them is back. I'm a mom. I have three boys that are grown now, sort of, for the most part. But for years, I had au pairs that lived in my house because that was really the only way to juggle work and home life. And, you know, if you've ever had au pairs, they come in all shapes, sizes, forms, and capabilities. But we had one au pair that was phenomenal. And it was a male au pair. I have three boys. So at some point I decided that to go the male route just made more sense. And we had this au pair, and he came to us from South Africa. He was 17, just barely 18 when he came. So one of the youngest au pairs that we had. And I can't remember how, maybe my kids were like 10, 7, and 3 or 4 then. So they were still fairly young. And he was great. And I remember thinking, you know, kind of comparing him in my mind to my other au pairs. And I was like, what was it about Louis? And we had other ones that were great. So if anyone are listening, we love all of you. But what was it about Louis that made him so phenomenal? And there were two things I came down to. He made our family better. He just made our family better by being there, by what he did, whether it was, you know, I remember being in the ice cream shop one day and like turning around and my kids are there and, you know, it can be a little hectic. And he's like by the tables, like dancing with them. I'm like, okay, you are making my family better.
Yeah.
And then the other thing he did was he made my life easier. He anticipated what I needed. We'd go on vacation, and before we'd get there, and like in 2 seconds, like the kids' bags would be unpacked. I didn't even ask him to do it. They would just be unpacked, which would make my life easier. And so I asked those questions, you know, not about what did you do as an au pair, but what did you do at your last company that made the company better? And how did you make your boss's life easier? And sometimes I've told people that, they're like, oh, the boss's life, I'm like, yeah, they should make my life easier. They should make my job better, easier, so that I can do more strategic things or the next level things, because I don't have to worry about kind of what they're doing and thinking about that all day. And those are, you know, I still ask them, and look, you don't have to have a perfect answer, but I like to kind of hear what people say and just get them to think about it, because that's what I expect.
And those are phenomenal questions, because they kind of cut down to it both on the sort of on the basic level, because they're going to, you know, the answers they give are going to be kind of in line of what you're looking for, but it also provides sort of an opportunity for them to, like, how they answer that question is going to be a huge indicator on whether it's real or not. Because I think people who naturally are going to be good at these two things, they're going to probably have thousands of examples
Yeah.
of it, because
Yeah.
they acclimate to that and they understand what their role is, and they understand sort of, you know, maybe the pecking order is the wrong sort of picture, but just the fact that, you know, again, to make Deb's life easier is going to allow the organization to be more strategic, to your point, or to multiply its impact at a greater level. And if them coming in the door with that mentality off the bat is going to help accelerate toward that sort of, you know, once the dust settles and everybody has their sea legs and they're sort of been acclimated to the business, if you can get there quicker, that's really what the goal is. Those are
Yeah.
phenomenal questions.
And even if they don't work for me, like what are they going to do for their manager? Just maybe you see something that you can get out of their way, or that you can do something ahead of time so that they don't have to go and, spend their time doing it. They can be little things, but
Mhm.
those little things add up, and they're thoughtful. You're thinking about kind of how do we progress the organization ahead. And that's what you want. I mean,
Yeah, yeah. Because it can't be you dragging people up a mountain. It's got to be everybody walking up there together and helping each other. And it's not going to be a smooth. It's not going to be a smooth trip ever, right? Like there are no smooth mountains. Like it needs to be a little bit rugged for your feet to even dig in. But the more people that are ready for a climb, the easier your trek is going to be.
yeah. The other thing I look for, and I don't know how to, unfortunately, I think if you know a way to kind of question for this, but I love people who ask questions. Like there's nothing that drives me more crazy than when I know I have someone on my team who doesn't know something and they
Hmm.
don't ask, and they don't go figure it out, or they go figure out how to learn, and they pretend they have more information than they do. Right. They pretend to be more knowledgeable and stuff. Like, just tell me. Like, we were just talking to our sales team the other day, or I guess it was everybody had a lunch and learn. And I said, when you're hearing from a prospect and they throw out an acronym, for goodness sake, ask them what it means, right? Unless it's something you should know, it's in the industry, but ask them what it means. It tells you that they're listening. It tells you that you're curious, that you want to know, and you're going to be able to help them more. We recently went through some financing at HR Acuity, some growth financing, and this was the first time I'd ever done that, right, as a CEO. And there were times I had no clue what was going on. And I sat and asked. There's nothing wrong with that. It makes me better. It makes me smarter. I'm going to know more the next time. Look, this is my first time being a CEO.
Right.
And, when I started, I was a CEO of one. I was my own company, but now we've grown much larger. And so I constantly have to figure out what I don't know, what I know. Can I figure it out on my own by reading up on it? Or do I need to get a trusted advisor or even someone on my team to just say, look, let's, hold on. I don't understand. Like, I'm going to ask you, and there's no shame in that. I think it's much worse if you cover it up and try to get away with pretending that you know something.
Well, I think part of it is kind of comes down to you and whether you're willing to show that, I guess, quote unquote, vulnerability, which, I mean, why don't people ask? It's because they're kind of scared of looking stupid. But to your point,
Yeah.
like, who has all the answers? Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
nobody ever has all the answers. And I don't know. I ask all kinds of stupid questions. Maybe they're stupid. I just kind of don't care. To your question though, like, how do we sort of reinforce that? At least here, the only way that we've figured out, I mean, we struggle with the same thing because like we want people to be like super curious, people professionally or personally curious. Like that is a great skill to have, that curiosity that I hope I never lose my own. Like you're obviously a very curious person. That's what allows us to ask those questions and say, okay, well, I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Like if you're curious, then foundational to that is like a bunch of stuff that you don't know that you want to know about. You know what I'm saying? So
That's
there is.
absolutely, absolutely. I talk to our sales team about kind of getting curious with a prospect when you're talking to them. You want to understand what's going on in the organization. That's going to help you serve them better. It's going to help us understand what their challenges are. It's funny that kind of ties back to investigations. We
Yeah.
we work with a plaintiff's attorney. Her name's Lori Deem. So if she's listening, shout out to Lori. She's a really great plaintiff's attorney. She's very pragmatic, and you don't hear a lot of people on my end of the table saying that. But
Right.
we were on a panel years ago together, and she's been part of our employee relations roundtable events for years. She comes and shares her wisdom on what employee relations leaders or investigators should be watching, like what she's looking for, where are the holes she's trying to find when she has to go after a company. And she talks about the part about investigators when they get into trouble with allegations and they're doing internal investigations. She says when they have that lack of clinical curiosity. So
Yeah.
that's kind of her terminology she'll go over. They're not asking enough questions. They're not really figuring out what's going on. And so much of that holds true in anything you do.
Yeah, because if you don't have that, then what's filling up that space in your mind?
That's right.
It's a bunch of assumptions of like, I've seen it all before. Okay, I know exactly how this is. And it's never the same thing. The cases are never the exact same. The feelings that those people are feeling, they might be similar to other feelings that were driving the behaviors in other cases, but they're just not the exact same. How can they be? There's different circumstances at play. There's different personality types at play. There's different sort of nuances at play. And I think without those second level questions that only occur if there's true, as she calls it, sort of, clinical curiosity, then you end up missing stuff. And
Yeah.
those things that you miss at the margin are where the real opportunities for improvement can come, and where that real magic is. It's always a game of inches. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I guess the same would bode true for, how you work with your team members, right? So they all have different lives, they bring different experiences. If someone's doing something one way or not doing something one way, or, they're just not getting it, asking those questions, what's going on? Maybe there's something going on in their life, maybe something else is happening, maybe they learn a different way, or they need a different type of leadership from you. You got to ask the questions, because if you assume that everybody's the same, you're going to hit some walls.
Yeah, you're going to hit some walls. And I mean, I guess, why do you think we end up losing it? Is it a lack of humility? We people, is it an ego thing? Am I talking about the same thing? I mean, why do we end up, is it laziness? Is it no more, it's not interesting anymore? I mean, what is it?
Maybe you just assume everybody thinks the way you do, which is not a good thing, right? Or they
Yeah,
learn the same way that you do. And I have to like check myself sometime, because there's
same.
certain things that I know inherently because of my background or my experience, or just the way that I kind of process things. And I might need to slow down or speed up. It's going to be different for every person. Just like, different people are motivated in different ways, and, what's important to them, or, is really understanding how you're going to get the best out of them.
Yeah, and I think as you're interacting with different organizations, if you can keep that sort of clinical curiosity as I don't know, like a main value of your team, or of how you as an organization interact, it leaves a lot of room for the nuance and the uniqueness that is inherent to every business. Like, every business is not the same, even if there are many, even if there are a bunch of hospitals in the healthcare industry, each one of those are different. They've come from a different place, and they value different things, and the way they do work is different. And without that sort of curiosity and sort of humility to understand that, hey, everyone's kind of different, you end up starting to kind of create a bunch of, square holes that you're going to start jamming pegs of any shape into.
Yeah, I mean, think about it in both of our businesses, how we interact with our clients, how we create that relationship with them that's
Yeah.
ongoing. Maybe training some users might be different than others because of their culture or what they're expecting, and just kind of understanding that. And then we have to meld, we have to kind of mold ourselves and our process to fit that. And I think that's, why I'm pretty proud of our relationships with our clients. We have really great relationships with them, and we continue to kind of work with them and partner with them, because we're willing to listen, and we're willing to listen to what they need. And sometimes we can solve it, in an obvious way. And sometimes it's not a so obvious way, but we have to understand what they're trying to get to get there.
So I want to talk a little bit about, you kind of alluded a little bit to kind of how you got into this game. I'd love to hear a little bit more of that story, because I think the story of how you got into it was really organic and pure. And I think, I've seen, as I've gotten to know you and your company over, the last couple of months, I've seen how some of those notes in that initial story seem to play out, not only from you, but from others on your team.
Yeah. So how did I get into this? So I was an HR professional for about 20 years, doing a variety of things, but for some reason I did a lot of investigations. And when you do investigations, you get better at them. And so then you get asked to do the more complex ones and the tricky ones. And I just did them, and I did a lot of them. And along the way, a couple of people said to me, "Hey, you really like doing this." And, I always think it's funny that things you like doing, you just think everybody likes doing them.
Right.
And then you realize, I remember an attorney, she said to me, "I hate doing investigations, but you really like doing them." I'm like, "Oh, I didn't know there were people that didn't like doing them." Anyways, so I
What
did a
made you
lot of
good at
them.
them? What made you good at them, and what made you like it? Because to your point, some people hate it.
Yeah, I think I always joke that I grew up. I'm a rule follower, so I live vicariously through all the stupid things that other people do. So I don't know.
It's your excitement of someone coloring outside the
He
lines.
does. I'm like, I'm sorry, you did what? And why did you think that was a good idea? Just curious, right? In fact, maybe it's that curiosity, right? You
Maybe it
ask a
is.
lot of
Yeah.
questions. It's that curiosity. So I don't know. Maybe when you're a rule follower, you look at things differently, and you're like, wait, they weren't supposed to do that. And that's how I got into it for whatever reason. So, did a lot of investigations, and then I knew I wanted to go do something on my own, and I didn't know what it was. So around 2005, I started thinking more seriously about it. And I started asking people, like, what do you think I should do? I want to start my own business. And they said, well, we think you should go be an HR consultant. So
And
I
what do you
said,
think that drive was? That drive to do something on your own? What is that rooted
all
in?
through my career, I'd look at kind of the scene, and I worked at, big Honeywell, Citibank. I worked at big companies, and I would look up the chain. I mean, I was moving up, but I would look up at like the senior person and just look at them in that role and think, I don't want it. Like, that's just not the role that I want. So I felt I wanted to kind of go off on my own. Interestingly, my family, I'm one of three. My dad was he was an engineer turned realtor, had his own business. My sister is an entrepreneur. She has a music business for children. My brother has his own business in commercial real estate. So who knows? I don't know. Maybe it was something in what we were fed
Yeah, maybe
at
it's
a
in the
young
blood
age.
or in the water. Yeah.
Maybe. So anyway, so consulting, people said, go be an HR consultant. I thought, oh my God, I've spent my entire career giving HR consultants all the work I did not want to do. Why in the world would I start doing that? Kind of being, jack of all trades and kind of waiting for the jobs to come in. And so that's when I remember these kind of couple people across my career who had kind of pointed out how much I liked doing investigations. I had also done a few investigations in that time where we had outsourced it to a third party. And at the time, the only avenue to go if you want to outsource an investigation was to a law firm. And they did an okay job, but I kept thinking that lawyers were not the right people to do an investigation. Number one, your own law firm doesn't want to do the investigation. They want to litigate. Otherwise, they would be conflicted out if they did the investigation. And secondly, many lawyers have never left their law firm. So it's very difficult for them to really understand what it's like in a corporate or manufacturing or a sales setting to really understand what questions to ask or what might have happened. And then the third thing is, when you do an investigation in an organization, the last thing you really want is to put a lawyer across the table from someone. Because the first thing the employee is going to say is, well, should I get my lawyer? And that's really not what you want.
Right.
So I decided there was this need for third-party workplace investigations. I was going to solve it. I set up shop with HR Acuity. I started going out, and a friend of mine told me I needed a process. So I said, well, my investigation process, I can put that kind of a step-by-step process. So I put together this 5-step process and how we would go and conduct your investigations. At the time, it was called Dimensional Investigations. So I went out and started, selling our services to companies. When you needed someone to do a third-party workplace investigation, which was not all the time, it's a very small portion of investigations where you needed confidentiality or better capabilities, or you just didn't have the capacity, we would do it. So I had a pretty good network, and I went out to my network, and they said, great, when we have a need, we'll call you. I did a few investigations. And then they started saying, but tell us more about that process you have. We need a better process. So Nick, I'd never done sales before. So my first answer was, well, no, sorry, it's proprietary. You can't have my process. If you want my process, you have to use us to do your investigation. And I kept saying it over and over. And then that 2x4 that was hitting my head started to hurt.
Yeah.
And I decided, and so I remember I was at AOL, and they said the same thing to me. And I said, well, we're thinking of licensing it. And I had really no idea what I meant by that, but it sounded fancy.
Sounded good.
So it worked. And they were very interested in this license that we were thinking about. And so I went home and I said, well, I have this like paper-based process. I can't give AOL. That's like the internet people. I can't give them paper. They don't use paper there. I'm going to have to do something about it. So I decided that I would create this tech. And the only tech I knew was PowerPoint. That was kind of the level of tech. But the only thing else I knew about developing technology was that I had been on the receiving end of really bad HR technology my entire career. And so I knew what I didn't want to create. I didn't want to create technology that was clearly created by someone who had no idea what my job was, who wasn't in HR, who didn't care about kind of my experience or what the value I was getting out of it. So with those couple things, I went to PowerPoint, and about 50 pages later, or sheets later, I had this process, and I, had some people come to my dining room, and I showed, lawyers and HR professionals I worked with, my PowerPoint, and they liked it. And so, from there, it was kind of just, I wish I could tell you I did a lot more research, but I didn't. I was convinced I told my husband that I was pivoting the business. I told him it wouldn't take very long, a couple months, and I didn't need a lot of money. I had a little bit of money saved. That was going to be it. And so I learned a lot of things, but among them were that technology takes a lot longer than you expect,
Mm-hmm.
that technology is a lot more expensive than you expect, and that I have a really good husband. So
Wow, what a prince.
yes, he's stayed by my side for a long time now. So good guy.
That's awesome. I love that story so much, and thank you so much for sharing it and sharing it kind of in an authentic way. I find it funny that you said, "Well, I didn't do that much research." Well, you kind of had years of research. Like you kind of knew what worked. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, you're right. I probably was researching it my entire career.
Yeah.
And now if I ever talk to entrepreneurs or would-be entrepreneurs or future entrepreneurs about it, I say, I'm actually glad I didn't do any research, because had I gone
Yeah.
out and researched, what do you need to do to stand up an enterprise-wide software, and what kind of security do you need? And what kind of architecture? Oh my God. First of all, talk about not knowing what people were talking about at the time. I wouldn't
Right.
have understood anything,
Right.
and I would have run really, really fast and probably never done what I did.
Sometimes I like to say, sometimes you got to jump off the cliff to put the hang glider together. You can't put it
Yes.
together on the ground. You got to be in the air to do it. And I just love the story. You said a couple of things that I think really stand out to me, and I will get into the nuts and bolts of some kind of takeaways and some tips and stuff that you have. But you kind of said you had been on the receiving end of a bunch of technology and a bunch of services from people that either kind of didn't seem to get it and didn't really care. And I think
Yeah.
that's a really powerful heart to bring to a business. And I just would love to hear you kind of talk about that, how you've not lost that. I mean, that's an important sort of ingredient in your special sauce, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I mean, I think, right, I just remember like having issues with software and going to people and them, using prep things that just didn't make sense and not really caring that they didn't make sense to the end user. Our product would not be where it is today without our customers. I mean, just listening to them, listening to what they need. Look, I haven't been an HR practitioner for a long time now. So although, I still consider myself to be a thought leader in employee relations, I have not been a practitioner. And so it's really all about developing those relationships with our clients, but also people that aren't our clients. We've brought this employee relations community together a few years ago, 2015. We started getting calls from employee relations leaders about conferences and where to go for a conference, and realized there just was none. Employee relations has really evolved in the last few years. It's become
Mm-hmm.
much more strategic. It's really coming into its own, as opposed to being this transactional thing that I know I used to do, right? I used to someone came to my office, I dealt with the issue, I put it in my drawer, and then I went on to all those other strategic things that I was supposed to be doing. So we said, let's bring this group together, not really knowing what would happen. We invited employee relations leaders together, and it's really become this huge community, again, of both our clients, but also people that aren't our clients. Some may
Yeah.
be our clients someday, some may never be our clients, but they're so passionate about elevating this function and about what the employee experience should be, particularly now after Me Too, where, HR doesn't always get the best reviews in all of the headlines, but there are people that really do care. It's a balance between the employees and the company, and finding that right mix, but bringing them together and listening to their challenges and thinking about how we can improve our technology to help meet some of those challenges, so that the client, the employer, can reduce their risk, but also so that employee can have a good experience. Nick, my goal is that the HR reputation is going to change, not
Yeah.
because HR goes out and says, hey, we're great, come and use us, but because someone else sees something happening at work. So I see Susie having a bad day or having an issue with her manager, and I go over to her and I say, Susie, why don't you go to HR? Because I had a similar issue. It wasn't exactly the same, but I had a similar issue, and they actually really helped me. And that's how we're going to change it.
Yeah, I think so. I'm so glad that we're getting to this kind of topic, because the whole purpose of this podcast is to help elevate ethics and compliance in HR from this check the box pigeonhole that they get jammed into, this sort of cost center mentality that they get labeled with a lot, to being the strategic lever that it's supposed to be, the strategic lever that you're talking about. And I think I've always, I'm kind of a glass half full, optimistic, maybe bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, maybe I have rose-colored glasses. I'm that kind of a guy. And so I've just always looked at HR as, I've read the term human resources as, oh, these are the resources. This is a resource for the humans in the organization. But I think a lot of organizations or a lot of people have had experiences that are sort of diametrically opposed to what I'm talking about, where HR is viewed as, the controller of the labor units, the human resources. The
Yeah.
resources are the humans. You understand what I'm saying? It's sort of a dichotomy. And I think what you're talking about is, you kind of talked about there being this balance. But I guess, again, I've just sort of recently become kind of privy to this hate that people have for HR. And I was just kind of baffled by it, because a lot of the people that, we deal with on a day-to-day basis, like our clients, these people have a heart. Like, they're trying to make a difference.
Yeah.
They feel pigeonholed. Like, who wants to be called a cost center? I mean, it's an insane label in and of itself, but it speaks to sort of a broader view that, the corporation that or the organization that they're working for has of their function. But just speak to that a little bit, if you can. Like, do you think it's always been that way? This bad rap that HR has, like, is it like that in all organizations? Is it like that in just some? What is that kind of rooted in? I mean, we're talking, and we'll get to how we change it. I think conversations like this and people like us helping to empower these people is going to help change it, especially if we can turn some light bulbs on at the top. But to me, it's like it's a massive strategic lever. It's a massive asset in every organization that's being totally underutilized, because they're just kind of jamming these people in these holes, and then they end up starting to believe it in some cases.
Yeah. I mean, I think, look, HR was personnel years ago, so it was very transactional. And then it kind of had this evolution to be kind of more human centered. One of the challenges of HR is it's the most emotionally laden function. So
Right.
if I have a bad experience in HR at company one and I go to company two, I'm bringing that with me regardless of what, company two is doing. I don't know why, but if I have a bad experience with like the finance department at company one, somehow I think I give company two another chance. I don't know. And quite frankly, before me too, I used to say, well, I was different. My HR was different, and people really came to me and they felt good. And maybe that was true, but or maybe not, right? And I didn't have a way to quantify it.
Right.
I just kind of thought I was doing the right thing. And then when we heard that all these people weren't coming forward, that felt like they were being harassed, I wasn't surprised, but I had to look in the mirror, even though I'm not practicing now, to say, you know what, you can't just say, I'm a good one, the rest are bad, because there's an overarching issue with it. I think that as HR gets more data driven, and they have a long way to go, but that's how that's how they have to hold themselves accountable. If you look at marketing, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, when they were just kind of producing jingles and things like that, they weren't really taken as seriously as now. Marketing is taken seriously, and they've done that through data, and they have predictive indicators, and they can quantify what they're doing and see how successful they are with everything they're doing. Well, HR should be able to do that too. They should have predictive indicators of something going wrong in the organization. There are, because we know through our system, predictive indicators when there's a leader who's culturally not in balance with the rest of the organization. You can see that through behavioral activity that's happening in the organization. So that has to happen. You have to hold people accountable. We recently introduced into our system this idea of an ENPS score, an employee net promoter score, right? So I think we talked about this. So when, just like the classic net promoter score, how likely are you to recommend a company or a business to a friend or a colleague? At the end of an investigation or some interaction with employee relations or ER, you need to be able to send the complainant or the employee, whoever it is, a survey. And you're going to ask them that net promoter thing, but you can ask them things like to rate, I was treated with dignity and respect. My issue was handled in a timely manner. And then ask them, how likely are you to recommend that a colleague or a peer go to HR with a similar issue? And until HR starts to quantify and start to give themselves a baseline on those interactions with their employees, you can't say you're doing okay. And you might not like what you hear, but you need to understand, how is this impacting the employee? We're not asking them, did they like the outcome? We're just asking them about the experience.
Yeah. And I think we're talking a little bit about like certainty, right? I think the experience that you just kind of discussed when you had to look yourself in the mirror after this Me Too thing
Yeah.
is, listen, if there's a bunch of people who aren't reporting, then you can't have high certainty that you're finding all the issues.
Yeah.
Because you're absolutely not. And to your point, I think without this data, it just turns into this sort of amorphous kind of, squishy, touchy feely thing that people at the top who are maybe more type A, more analytical or whatever, who kind of who maybe are more sort of materialists, in that if you can't see it or touch it or feel it, if it can't go into a spreadsheet, it doesn't exist. Then this thing that we're talking about, this department that touches the people, that can affect how folks actually feel in their workplace, where they spend so much of their time, then it just ends up devolving into this thing that doesn't get the respect that it needs. But I love how you talked about this ENPS. That's data.
Yeah.
And that's a leading indicator. So we're talking about certainty at some level. And then we're also talking about this concept, like you just said, that like reality is our friend. So if you don't like what you hear, it's the facts.
That's right.
You can
You got
fix
to
it.
just
You can
embed it. You got to
address
get
it.
on the phone and find out what happened.
Right.
If someone's a detractor, it should go to the senior HR person. They should get on the phone and say, what happened during that interaction? Now, look, some people odd things happen over time, but you need to kind of use that as a baseline. The other thing that HR has kind of it's just a harder than like a marketing, is that they have a resource that has emotions, right?
Right.
So if you have physical resources or, material resources, they don't really get a say in whether or not they liked what happened. So it is more complex.
Yeah, it is. It is more complex, but also it's kind of an old-fashioned way of thinking to kind of discount that emotional element, when in most all organizations at this sort of age of the economy, the assets are humans, which are emotional.
Absolutely. And you got to figure out how to work with it. Yeah, we did a survey in October. We surveyed about 1,500 workers, so kind of a generic worker. And we asked them about, whether they knew where to go if something happened, whether they would report something, whether they did report something if they happened, whether it was investigated, the outcome of it, blah, blah, blah. So the end result was that employees who reported an issue and it was investigated and resolved, from a net promoter score, were just as likely to recommend the company as employees where nothing happened. So basically saying, look, we don't expect you to be perfect, employer, as long as when something happens, you resolve it. And then I'm good. I'm good.
Yeah, and there's sort of a corollary to that in this concept called fair process when you're managing a team. And the basis of fair process is saying, like, I'm not going to come out of the room as the leader and bang a gavel and say, this is what we're doing, get in line and march, but we're actually going to have a conversation about it. And we're going to discuss sort of the purpose behind what we're trying to pursue and get ideas from everybody. And I think there's that same feeling of, even if we don't do my idea, as long as I feel like you care and you've listened to my input, I'm as satisfied with what we end up doing as if we did my idea. And it's the same type of thing that you're talking about there.
I used to.
No, go.
I used to give this kind of correlation to the posting process. And I'd ask people, well, do you have a posting process at your job? And they'd say, of course we do. Everybody has a posting process. I say, well, why do you have a posting process? And they say, well, we want to find candidates for the job. And what I say is, well, that's true, except you also have it for another reason. Let's say you don't have a posting process and there's an opportunity that you see is open, somebody leaves a company, and I, Deb Muller, am interested in it, and it's not posted. And all of a sudden I see that Nick Gallo got the job. Well, I'm going to come to my own conclusions as to why you got the job, and I might decide that you, quite frankly, you're younger and you're a male. And maybe my neighbor, who's the employment attorney, really tells me that that's why it happened.
Mm-hmm.
But if you gave me the opportunity to post for the job, I could raise my hand, I could be interviewed for it, and I could have a conversation with someone who would say, Deb, you would be great for that, maybe on the next rotation, or you need to go get your PhD. So that's a requirement. And so I might not be happy about not getting the job, but I'm going to be much more accepting of it because there was a process. And
Right.
I felt like the company took it seriously and it gave me an opportunity. So like anything else, we just have to, process is really important. Consistency of process is going to drive consistency of outcomes.
Yeah. And that is such a blind spot for a lot of organizations. Like just to zoom in on this example that you just gave, those feelings then of that person who feels like they didn't get a fair shake, those sit and those fester,
Yes.
and those get spread around in the lunchroom, and those permeate to other people, and those put ideas in other folks' minds that can be confirmed through other unfair
Mhm.
processes where there's not that transparency, and it can begin to really rot out a culture.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, look, I'm not saying every company is perfect. And, we hear enough day in and day out of companies that are not doing the right thing. But I think, a lot of them do want to do the right thing. I mean, although I have to say, in the last couple of weeks of kind of going out and talking to prospective clients and just organizations, I do feel that there's a risk of some complacency now that we're kind of 2 years out. And it worries me when I see some large
2 years
companies
out
not.
from the Me Too
For me
explosion.
too. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it does worry me. And I used to say it earlier on, and now I've kind of been saying this more often, but do the leaders really want that 75% of people that weren't reporting to report things? Because if they do, they have to start doing something about it. And I hate to say that, but for some organizations, I don't see the level of urgency that we should be seeing on this matter that we heard about.
So let's talk about that a little bit, because I think that is a symptom of a deeper issue that I'd like to kind of explore. But what do you think that is? Is it, hey, I got other stuff to do, no news is good news? Or I just want to kind of, act like I care because you have to act like you care. But I kind of don't care because I just care about, the bottom line, and
I
I don't
don't
want to
know.
deal
I
with
mean, I
what
hate to
people.
say it, I have someone here who always says, everybody talks about, no one's going to say diversity is a bad idea, right?
Well, yeah, yeah. No
But
one's going to say
right, but
culture is a
are
bad
they really
idea.
doing it? Yeah. Are they
But
really doing anything? And I think the other problem, and and let me just say, we have some amazing clients, and I also know some great companies who aren't clients who are doing the right thing. But in a culture or in organizational structures where most of the senior leaders are men, white men, and I'm sorry, Nick, I'm not going to cast you amongst this, don't.
I'm one of the good ones.
But
Okay.
but
Okay.
when I think of, so I'm leading a company and I'm saying, oh, I can do this. I want to know what people are saying. I want to know if there's issues in my organization. Are there some of them that are looking at their own selves in the mirror, maybe over their 20 or 30-year career, or the friends that they know or the colleagues that they have that have heard jokes or seen things happen, and they're like, oh shit, if I do this, if I'm really progressive on this, is it going to come back to haunt me? I hate to say that, but I
Okay. So
gotta
you
wonder.
think you think it might be a self-preservation thing?
It might be. It might be. I don't know. We're gonna see. I mean, I'm really hoping that maybe it's just I had a bad week and I felt like there was complacency with some of the companies I was talking to, but I do worry that it's just, this too will pass, and I'm gonna, and kind of say I'm doing the right thing, but I'm really not going to invest. I mean, I find it. Look, we sell employee relations software specifically. And so, yeah, I would like to sell that software. I think that when you have employee relations issues, harassment complaints, disruption, behavioral issues in the workforce, it deserves its own technology.
Right.
It's specific. You cannot do it on a ticketing system. You shouldn't be sharing it with your IT group or your others for so many reasons. It has specific workflows. Investigating is an art versus a science. It is not something that can be programmatically, and you have to be in a system that understands it, not only for the workflow, but also for the data. I mean, if data is hard enough to get, you certainly need software that understands the type of data that you're trying to get out of it and actually pushes that forward to you. If they can't say after Me Too that it's worth investing in that, and by the way, it's a small percentage of what they're
Yeah.
on other
Yeah.
softwares. And by the way, it integrates with all the others. We're not saying be totally separate. I just don't get it. I don't get it.
Yeah.
And I
And
might be a little biased, of course.
well, I mean, I think we're talking about something that's real though. So maybe I'm biased and maybe we're just sort of preaching to each other here. I don't know, but like the so from a top-down standpoint, and we've been talking about this a lot. there seems to be this desire, and I think it's laziness. There, I said it. I think it's laziness at the top to want to have to attribute each dollar I spend to some return. And I get that, you know, these clients are businesses, and I understand the concept of ROI. I run my own business. You know, we run our own business with ROI, obviously.
Right.
But there's enough data out there at this point, and it's been sort of statistically significant enough for it to be real, at least in my mind, that like ethical companies literally outperform their, you know, non-ethical counterparts, right? Like these studies come
Yeah,
out. The most
absolutely.
recent one was like over 13% outperformance. And this is just looking at public companies, never mind private companies, which
Yeah.
I would argue are even larger outperformance. So at a top-down level, we know that this alpha is being created. It's being generated by these ethical organizations. But it seems like the companies that can't wrap their head around it are the ones that can't wrap their head around the indirect nature of some of these quote unquote cost center functions, and how pouring money into these functions ultimately translates into what they myopically care most about, which is dollars, bottom line, stock returns, you know, whatever those sort of hard asset-based, sort of cash-based,
Right.
you know,
Right.
results are. And this, I've been kind of using this illustration lately, and like, think of your last year's salary. Like, how would you allocate that toward your your body parts? How much of that goes to your hands? How much of that goes to your face and to your head? And then how much of that goes to your personality or to your health? Like,
Yeah.
it's an insane question, but
Right.
it just means that it's just meant to illustrate the insanity of that approach taken to a massive organism, which is a business that's super interconnected. Like, what is a cost center? It's just such a
No,
backward way of thinking.
it's really,
And
I
so,
didn't get it at first, I have to tell you. And now I'm thinking about what you're saying, and it's actually really smart. I mean, it's just, yeah.
I mean, but it's such an insane way to think about it. And again, we're not
Hmm.
talking about, hey, you need to spend, you know, 20% of your revenue to invest in becoming an ethical business. You need to spend 20% of your revenue to become, to invest in your culture. But I can tell you, Deb, and this is going to happen big time over this next 10 years. Millennials are wired differently. They have a different priority set of what they care about. They have a different set of goals that they think are even attainable. Like, listen, coming out of college and having seen the housing crash, having seen parents' 401ks get smashed, having come out with hundreds of thousands of dollars of credit card debt, makes this American dream of buying a house, staying at an organization for 30 years, and retiring with $3 million when you're 65, it's gone.
Yeah.
So thus, money then, obviously in that old paradigm, plays a much higher like role. It's a much higher, you know, on that sort of hierarchy of needs or goals or whatever. That's fallen down to other things such as purpose, and such as like, what's my impact, and is the organization gonna, you know, treat me like a productive person, and is it going to value who I am, and is it going to pour into me and help me get better, and is it going to be an ethical place that I'm going to come to every day because I want to, not because I have to. Like, there's a ton of labor mobility now, right? Like, we have such a low unemployment rate, and part of that's due to the economy, but part of that's due to some of the things that I'm talking about. And I think that as millennials come from being the largest generation right now in the workforce to then 75% of the workforce in the next 10 years, the companies that, you know, are clients of yours that understand this thing, this ethics thing, this employee relations thing, this sort of employee promoter score thing, you know, whatever you want to call it, employer branding, whatever, who get it, and the ones who don't, there's going to be a massive separation. And then we're
Yeah.
going to see around 2025 or 2026, when it starts getting really bad and people's turnover is so high and they can't get it. And then there's these other competitors that from the surface look to be doing the exact same thing. They're making cars just like us, or they're selling, you know, sandwiches just like us. How are they able to keep their workforce for so much longer? How are they able to have such a low turnover? Well, it's going to be because of these intangible things, these indirect things, this personality, getting back to my other metaphor, or the health of the business. And they're going to be working to try to catch up to it, but it's going to be too late. So to
Right.
me,
Yeah.
when's the best time to start something? 10 years ago. When's the next best time? Today. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying?
I
So,
agree.
so we got to help kind of, so now that I'm stepping off my soapbox, what do we do to help empower the folks that are in these functions, that are talking to a boss? Like, again, like you said, no one's going to say in a manufacturing setting, no CEO or board is going to say, we don't really care about safety. But I can tell you, I've been in these board meetings that when they start the meeting with safety, and everyone's looking at their phones, that's an indication for it's an indication of what they actually think about safety. And there's a corollary to what
Absolutely.
we're talking about. So how does somebody who gets what I'm saying, who gets what you're saying, who's listening to this and they're like, man, these guys are on, they're right on point. How do we help them turn those light bulbs on at the top and accelerate those light bulbs being turned on, as opposed to just waiting until people who are just wired like we are get up to those powers of position?
Oh, you want me to answer that? I don't
Yeah.
know.
I mean,
It's a
how do we do
magic
it?
question. It's hard. I don't know. I mean, we've tried, like you're saying, it's cost avoidance. We're trying to get them to think about it in a different way. Going back to kind of our solution, I try to talk about it in terms of kind of being like the heart surgeon, right? The cardiologist, like it is
Mhm.
avoidance. Like you do pay so you don't have a heart attack. You do, you for those riskier things, you have to take special care and do things. We can put some number against it, but it's hard. We did an ROI study with Forrester, and it was like at the low end, like 500%.
It's
And a
crazy.
lot of, yeah,
It's
it's
a
there. It's
no-brainer.
there.
I mean, it's such a
Turnover.
no-brainer. It pays for
Yeah.
itself in
It
2 months.
it
You know what I mean?
does. I think it was 3, but yeah, 3 months. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm hoping that we can make a difference. We need people to evangelize that are willing to go to bat um, within the organization, and we're there to support them and give them the tools. And we're fortunate that there are people like that. I mean, there's some great leaders that really kind of beating maybe the not as popular drum and being heard.
Yeah. Yeah. This is, it's kind of an exciting time though, because like 10 years ago, I don't feel like this conversation would be as like resonant with
Oh
as many
no.
people as it will now.
Yeah.
It feels like it's time, and maybe it's the Me Too thing, and maybe it's all these sort of, straws on the camel's back that's finally going to break it and help some people understand that, again, like you running your company, you need to take time for your family, and you need to take time for your mental health, and you need to take time for your physical health. Like these are all sort of expenses that end up allowing you to be a more productive leader of your organization. Companies need to turn that light bulb on and understand that these indirect things are actually part of the whole organism. They're not vestigial organs that are just, you need to have them.
Right. Absolutely. So it's going to be interesting. It's definitely, time has changed. I do think if anything's going to happen, it's going to be now.
Yeah.
And that's where I get a little bit frustrated when I see hints that some people aren't going there. But on the other hand, we're a lot busier. We're talking to a lot more people. They're thinking differently. So I'm still optimistic.
So give us a couple of takeaways for our listeners who are trying to elevate. We've said that word a bunch in our own conversations and a bunch today, to elevate their position and elevate their impact. What do you think? How do we help them not get jaded and to, rekindle that passion that they've had at some point before they got into this sort of corporate machine? I mean, these are just some kind of hints of conversations that I've had with folks.
You mean like in general,
Just in
people in
general.
general?
Yeah.
You have to be passionate about what you do. Think about what it is in your day that you really like. If you're doing a million things, which of the things do you gravitate towards? And then try to find ways to elevate that, or to find more ways to do things better. With my kids now, one of them, my last one's going to college. I'm like, what do you like to do? And he's like, I won't make money. And I'm like, don't worry about that. Figure out what you like to do, and then the rest will come, because you're
Right.
going to bring yourself in such a different place. You're going to wake up every day in such a different place. I love what I do, so it motivates me. My husband, I brought him up before, but many years he left his job a few years ago and was going to go back into the grind of corporate finance. And I said, why? I'm like, you hate what you've done for so many years. Now it's your turn. Like, do something you love. I wake up every day and I cannot wait to get to work. And I hate to say this, sometimes Friday comes too soon. And I'm a little odd, right? Because I just have so much more that I want to do. And everybody should have that ability, or you shouldn't be doing what you're doing. And I'm really proud. He's actually going to graduate this year with his graduate degree in special education, and he's going to be a teacher.
Wow.
Yeah. So find that passion.
What a cool pivot that is.
Yeah.
But, that passion is a big deal. And, that advice you gave to your son is sound advice. Like, The money's a
Yeah, I don't know. I
byproduct.
don't know if he listened, Nick, but I gave it.
Well,
It's on the
I'm
record
sure he'll
now.
listen to this. He should listen to this. Send him this episode here.
That's right.
But the money is a byproduct. And if you do, we always talk about, like, if you plant the right seeds, you're going to have a good harvest. And if you're
Yep.
doing those things that are passionate, or that are part of your passion, those good outcomes are going to come. It's really great advice. How can people find you? How can they find that study you guys did? Because that was super interesting. How can people learn more about you and the things that you do to sort of make the world a better workplace?
Oh, great. Well, certainly go to our website, hracuity.com, and in our resources, you'll find that survey or that study, along with a lot of other things. We do a benchmark study. There's a lot of other great things there. You can find us on LinkedIn. We are now on Instagram of
Ooh,
late,
look at
which is a
you.
little more fun, I know. Twitter, of course. I think those are like the main places that you can find out information, and happy to chat with anybody. You can, connect with me on LinkedIn and we can start a conversation as well.
Well, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for joining us. I feel kind of blessed to have one of my favorite female CEOs on the day after International Women's Day to just spend so much time and be so open with us around your story, around the impact that you're having, and giving us so many kind of actionable tips for our listeners to help us elevate it. I mean, it's going to happen. We're going to break through. Whether it's this year or next year or the next couple of years, the change is coming. I can feel the tide changing. And I'm just excited to be fighting alongside you.
Yeah, me too, Nick. Look forward to continue to work together. And it was a great conversation. Appreciate you having me.
Thanks, Deb.